Okay, for this session, we're going to spend a little bit of time on the canopies. Um, as you can see here, I have three main sections to talk about canopies. First of all, the one describing what should be done in order to have the canopy using clear resin. The second one will be creating the molds for using thermoforming. And the last one that I think could be used for both will be the way to create the model that can be used in order to easily cut the masks for those canopies. Okay, so the canopy clear, so that means using the clear resin is something which is very easy. At the end of the day, you have something like that. It's you can see here that in fact I have my canopies for the big size, big part of it in three parts because you've seen some photos in which I would say that this part is put upright, okay, up straight, I would say, and this part is going down. So this is how the canopy was open in a way. And of course, there is the bottom window, which is there. So how to get to those kind of things? Well, we're gonna, for example, take the left of it. Okay, I will show you a little bit how it is done. So first of all, you always start from the same thing, which is going down. Okay, this thing here. Okay, that's the main skin that I had a video in order to describe how this was done in a way. And then you do a kind of offset. Offsets, sometimes they are not working, but when you have such easy shapes, it's working very well. And you can see here that I'm using something which is in my global sheet, which is the clear resin thickness, which is 0.5 millimeter. So that will allow to keep the transparency of the clear resins in my opinion, in any way. So at the end you have something. Yeah, okay. So at the end you have something which is like that, and then you are creating the windows themselves. So all windows they are started from something which is whoops. Uh, which is the canopy side window SK that I will try to find. In a way that should be in my canopies group, eventually canopy side window SK. Look at that organization. Okay, so this is exactly that here. It may seem a little bit offset, but in fact that's because I'm not using the PA side view. This one I'm using the FANA side view, okay, in a way. And as you can see here, it's going not too bad with that, okay. So once I have this full window sketch, I'm using it in order to have some of those things, and some of those things they are just copy of some edges, okay, of the original sketch, which allow me to do an extrude of that. On that extrude I basically cut it with my original I would say surface, and that give me my first window. So the first window is something which is 0.1, okay, so that's the clear resin indent in a way. So that means that in the clear resins, the windows will be kind of embossed in a way, or will be cut in the clear resin of simply 0.1 millimeter. So that means very, very small. Okay, so almost non-visible in a way. And when you do that with all the windows, so that means that all the windows they are here. Of course, when you have the cut, that gives you that. Now it turns out that in fact, as I showed you here, I need a slicer in order to make sure that I will be, corresponding to my fuselage. And I'm using this slicer because that allows me to make sure that those offsets they are going in whatever directions. They are not going into the direction of pure X, and everything like that. So I need to use the same slicer that I've used in order to cut the fuselage, to use the same slicer for the cockpit. And this is exactly what I'm doing here. And at the end of the day, that gives me this piece, which is really the neat piece. In fact, this piece, I just do that as a symmetry, and then I'm unioning that. And in fact, this is one piece that you will find in my plate that correspond to the clear resin plates. Okay, so it's fairly easy in a way. The problem is that in that particular occasion, I know that this canopy here for the big part is a kind of cut, and in fact I'm using this cut here because I want to have the top part and the left and the right part separated, and this is why I've also used a slicer here. So I mean nothing very fancy for that, and at the end of the day I have all my canopies that are here. There is not that much of things to say for the windshield, except that here, because of the particular case of the shape itself, I started from a window which is described by uh, here, okay, which is described on the XY plane, okay, because that was much easier to do that this way. Now, of course, keeping in mind that I have my shield here, okay, and at the end of the day, that allows me to cut the window that I had, and it's exactly the same thing here with the same indent here, and at the end of the day I have my clear resin which is cut, and then same way I'm using the same slicer in order to make sure that I have a fit between the fuselage, the windshield, and the last canopy itself. So not very complex in a way, but I would say efficient way of doing that. So that's for the first version. Yeah, in my original designs, I had only the version for thermoforming, but I understand that some people will not have the machines or do not want to use thermoforming. So this is why I have included that in my demonstration of this new model. For the mold itself, it's I have here also three molds. Okay, one for the bottom window, one for the windshield, and one for the for this main canopy here. So in fact, I will show you a little bit how I've done that, because that's a little bit more complex in a way. So the canopy clear sheet, okay, it's roughly into the same idea that you've seen several times. Okay, so what I've done is that I've started the same idea, okay, with something that I called a base, and that base is basically two resin thickness, so it's 1 mm.4 deep. And in fact, I'm using that I will reduce it by 0.3 mm, which is the clear sheet thickness. So that means that when you thermoforming, usually you are taking sheets of plastics that are 0.6, 0.5 mm thick. But when you stretch them using thermoforming, it goes down to something like 0.3 mm thick. So I need the mold to be 0.3 mm thick from what I'm shooting for in order to let, I would say, the space for the matter to be there. So in fact, when you're using clear resin, you will have something which will be 0.5 mm thick, but when you are using thermoforming, you will have something at the end that will be 0.3 mm thick. And of course, that means that this is the base that I will use in order to do my thermoforming. The same way that I had my clear resin tool and whatever, I've copied that in order to have all my canopies windows in a way. But in fact, those canopy windows, they are also started from the same canopy window that you've seen, which is of course a little bit higher here. And in terms of, let's say, width, I'm going to 0.5. So that means you have to do a little bit of arithmetic here. If the thickness of, the thermoform is 0.3 and I'm going 0.5 deep, that means that inside there will be holes of 0.2 mm. So in a way, I would say uh, the windows in the thermoforming will be a little bit more deep than the windows into the clear resins, but I think that I need that in order to make sure that I have my resolution in a way that is enough here. So that's the basis of how to get the windows which are 0.2 mm, inside, I would say, my mold in a way, or the main mold. Now, as usual here, I have um my left on my right, and I'm making them, fusion in order to have my full piece here. Uh, so that's the first thing. I'm now what I'm doing is that I'm going at the bottom of that, okay, and I'm drawing a sketch that will be inside this 1.4 mm minus 0.3 mm, so 1.1 mm. And I'm just drawing a sketch by, hand sketch in order to have the contour of that. What that allows me to cut, I would say, and to have the basis of my mold in a way. And in fact, I'm using that as a slice, okay? And at the end of the day, when I'm using my slice, okay, at the end of the day, I will keep only the basis of that, okay? On that basis, of course, I will union it again with the thing that I've sliced, and that gives me my main sheet mold, which is this thing here. Okay, so that will allow me to do a good mold in a way, but As you've seen, what I've done is that I've gone a little bit further, and I've cut holes into my molds. So um, the first thing is that I'm using that in order to make sure that the resin will have way to get out. Okay. And then I have my side holes here. My side holes, I've made several attempts in order to understand, what are there. My side holes, they are something like that, and you can see here that the radius is 0.2 millimeters. So that means that the full hole has a diameter of 0.4 millimeter. But also I've used that side holes, in order to make sure that I remove some matter, because I do not want that mold to be too high with respect to the plastic sheet that I will use to thermoform. So I'm cutting the basis in order to make sure that this is close to, what I'm using when I will do the thermoforming. And at the end of the day, this is the holes that I'm using. Okay, and also I have to sorry. I have also to have the top window holes here. Uh, okay, not top window holes X, sorry. Okay, in order to have some little holes also here. Okay, I'm using that also for the windshield, so the same. So this is why you see those two things for the windshield here. And at the end of the day, that gives me something which is all these holes that I'm cutting directly into my windshield. Okay, so that whoops, windshield. Okay, here I do not want to see that. Sorry, and that gives me this. So in this, again, I do not want to see that. So this is for the resin to get out, because those holes are too small for the resins to get out, but that will allow, when I'm vacuum form, the air to be, kind of going through that, and that in fact will allow the plastic sheet to really, I would say, follow those edges here. And of course, I have the same thing for the edges over there. And that's exactly the same thing that I'm using for the windshield, of course. So exactly the same ideas, okay? Around the holes, usually for each window I have two holes, that are a little bit opposite from each other. Um, and yeah, that's it. And then the holes for the resin. So, and exactly the same thing for the bottom sheet, which is of course much easier in a way, because there is no window here. So that's something which was easy to do. So I have that. Then after that, I have what I'm calling the canopy masks. So it's roughly the same idea. Okay, so side cut masks here. What is this? That's uh, it's using in a way the clear resin offset. Okay, that I will let's say extend in a way in the two directions. Okay. And so that means that this is really, because this is the canopy main clear resin. So it's really, I would say, something which is exactly like the resin width in a way. But I want to extend that. The idea is that I have here a little recess, okay, that will allow me to go with a cutter around all those lines here. Okay, all those lines, I will go with a cutter, with a with a new blade, certainly, and that will allow me to cut the mask. I would say in vivo, in a way. Okay, so that means that those masks, I'm sure that they will be at the exact, direction. Okay, and that will also allow me to have both the mask for the inside and the outside. Okay, I have the same thing for the outside, and I have the same cuts for the inside in a way, so that will allow me to have mask for both the inside and the outside. Of course, the thickness of the thermoforming is a little bit smaller, so that means that it's likely that the mask will be a little bit wider than needed for the thermoforming, but that's okay with me because that means that I will take no risks having paint, in this thing. So this is what I wanted to show for I would say the three artifacts or the three types of object that I'm creating. Uh, for the canopies, I will certainly show you a little bit the results of my experiments using clear resins, because in order to push that and to make sure that the guys having only 3D printers with resin would be allowed to have the canopies. So I will do a first test using a clear resin, and that's going to be the next chapter of this video. Okay, so we'll talk about canopies. So I think I've shown you the design of the different things. As you know, basically I'm using two techniques. One is the thermoforming in a way. The other one should be the transparent resin. So to tell you the truth, I never kind of invested in the transparent resin, but I understand that some of the guys that will buy my models, one way or another, will only have a 3D resin printer. So in that case, I must provide them with a technique how to do the thing with transparent resin in a way, or clear resin. So as usual, I had to go through my regular calibration stuff using the things for the bottom exposure time, and then using the same things that I've shown in my previous videos around calibration itself. So especially using 3D GD boxes and everything. So the little thing, as you can see, is that I think I'm not sure that you will see it very well, but there is a kind of yellowing stuff. But as time goes by, the yellow kind of disappears, so it's pretty interesting. So after a while, you get something like this. So this is just after one coat of, let's say, JX clear varnish in a way. So as you can see, it's not too bad in terms of transparency. Okay, so I will put a second coat anyway. I've seen that some people are doing two coats, but the idea was to see if this 0.5 millimeter was okay. That was a mistake, first thing. So don't look at that too much and whatever. But as you can see, this is the bottom window, and this is the windshield. Again, I will provide a second coat, but well, in any case, I don't think that can really compete with thermoforming. So I just wanted to show you here how I'm using the machines that again I've shown into another video. Now I don't know if you will see it, but in fact I've in the design, I've shown you that there are some holes, very small holes here, okay, and very small hole here, and that allows me to have kind of crisp, let's say, definition. And of course, it's very, very transparent, very thin, much thinner. So it's roughly between 0.3, 0.2 millimeter thick, and it's pretty good. The last thing that I've shown you is the fact that I've designed things in order to do the masks. And of course, I will put all that in practice, and that will give you the idea about what I'm shooting for.